Hello and welcome to the Tech on Toast podcast. My name's Chris Fletcher and I'm your host. Tech on Toast exists to connect hospitality to technology. Search for your best problem-solving tech on our marketplace, listen to both operators and tech experts on our podcast, or just meet up with the brilliant people who are helping innovate the hospitality industry as we enter a new era. Welcome to Tech on Toast. The Tech on Toast podcast is brought to you today by Rems Hospitality. Benchmark your restaurant across other venues securely and gain market share. To find out more about Rems, head over to their website, remshospitality.com. Enjoy the show. Welcome, guys, to the next episode of the Tech on Toast podcast. And this week, I'm very happy to have my new friend, I think. We've been meeting quite a lot recently. But Robin Chiang, who's the Vice President of Global Sales and Services at OpenTable. Robin, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it is. Rob, you've been traveling, though, haven't you? Where have you been? You've been away this week.
Yeah, my life is basically half on the plane. So in the US, which is a broad remit, but, from coast to coast there. So I was in last 2 weeks, Orlando, then San Francisco, then Chicago, Boston. So
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Cardiff and London, so I think you're winning. I don't know. Are you winning? I don't know.
Definitely not winning, I think.
And tell me about OpenTable. So for anybody listening in who hasn't heard of OpenTable or haven't been involved in OpenTable with some point in their hospitality life, what does it do?
Yeah, so OpenTable, for those that haven't come across us or haven't talked to us for a while, we're an all-in-one hospitality system that helps restaurateurs run their front of house. We basically take best-in-class practices, productize that into software, and help you become the best front of house GM that you can possibly be. And we think about our product not just as software, but across the whole spectrum, including offline. We have fantastic account managers, customer service, and we think we're best in class at that 24/7, 365. On call.
It's a big part. So I talk to a lot of tech people, obviously, and I think one of the biggest differentiators between different products and different things everyone does is support. And it's the one thing that you can't fix, particularly with tech, right? It's because obviously there's a tech element to connect people, but there's a human element in there where actually good support is done by good humans. And when we first met, you were talking about the fact that a lot of OpenTable people you look to recruit or bring in are ex-hospitality or have some experience in the industry. Is that the case?
Yeah, they all have a passion for the industry, obviously. That's what we look for, first and foremost. We're happy to take people who are a little bit more raw in skill set, but just have great passion and a good intellect. But most of them are from the restaurant industry. We think of ourselves as obviously a restaurant first, but a restaurant industry business, and we just happen to sell software. Yeah. I deeply believe we'd be successful, no matter what we sold restaurant industry in terms of anything complex, but we just happen to sell a software system as well.
I think that's really important, isn't it? That sometimes team and product get put together, but actually the team is always first, right? The team that you have or you hire that you work with is often the key to success.
Yeah, and we work pretty well as a team across technology, marketing, and sales and operations, I think. I've been involved in a lot of different businesses, and this one is pretty aligned. And that's because it's simple, really. It's restaurant first. But anytime we need to make a decision, that's the question we ask ourselves. Does this help restaurants? It's, we were debating yesterday on how we word that and then communicate that across the globe to our offices. But that just makes decision-making really simple.
It really does. And I work in a startup called Atolo, which is its very early stages, and messaging is so key, right? And because you want to run in 5,000 different directions, but the reality is you've just got to be very clear internally and externally with what you're saying. And it's a challenge, definitely at the start. And the holy grail for operators is new customers or retaining customers. And OpenTable supports that, I'm sure, in many different ways. How are you really working to help drive that for the customers you have, like to drive new traffic and retain the customers they already have?
Yeah, so we think about marketing for a restaurant more holistically. So we stand in the shoes of the marketer or the restaurateur. And we start with, hey, the restaurant should be running their own marketing and PR. Yeah. But that's where we should start. We want to supplement that. And I think for those that have come across OpenTable before, they know we have one of the largest dining networks in the world. It's a very high-value dining network by the numbers, where we know people that come to OpenTable spend a lot more than the average, even within the same restaurant. So that's at your fingertips. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here. We're trying to put butts on seats as restaurateurs, right? And once they come through the door, that's really your diner. Like, your product is your marketing. They're going to come back. We deliver a lot of first-time diners. And the other thing we do really well is we deliver a lot of traveling diners who are also very high value. And we know that by the numbers. You know, they need to find somewhere they want to eat. They don't know the city. We know a lot of times they have a corporate credit card. They need to find a platform, and OpenTable has been like a fantastic platform for that.
That's huge, isn't it? Because that you're right. And having spent most of my life in restaurants, hotels, in operating, actually those kind of customers are absolute gold dust, because you're right, they have a higher average spend because the spend isn't out of their pocket generally themselves, and they're very predictable in the fact they'll come in, spend so much time at a table, spend so much money, eat probably the similar product, and probably bring some guests next time they're in, right? Their business colleagues or whoever they're meeting. So it's actually a golden goose of the customer, I find, those guys. And what about, so if I'm using OpenTable physically, what kind of functions am I getting from OpenTable? So what can I do as a customer?
Yeah, so as a restaurateur, obviously, what we do best, we help you maximize revenue. So that's what we do. We're the pioneers of that, and we still think we're one of the forerunners in technology at that front. We'll help you increase turn times. For those that want more control, you can adjust your turn times by different seatings. So, for example, if you know two tops turn quicker at 5 p.m. versus at 7 p.m., you can have quicker turn times and set that at 5 p.m. Or you can let us do it all for you. The system can also be automated. So all of that is at your fingertips, and obviously multiple ways to get butts in seats. As I mentioned, go through our exclusive diner network for all the OpenTable software customers. But we have a fantastic CRM. You have all the diners that have come through the door. Some of them haven't dined with you for a while, or are more high value than others, or more specialized. They love fine wine, or that is auto tagged, and then you can send out an email campaign, which is absolutely free, right? That's from your own CRM. Target those folks and get them to come back in the restaurant that loved your product and may not have had a chance to remember to come back in for a while.
It's great. So you can segment that audience then, basically. So, you know, if I come in, I'm a business traveler, I like to travel on a Wednesday, I'm always in there, and I might drink a bottle of Merlot that I always have. I think I'm describing my life. And then I can be targeted, basically, can't I, to bring you back in. I think it's awesome. And obviously the pandemic shifted a lot of stuff in our behavior. We've spoken about many times, actually. It's just changed the way. I think I was talking to Patronics last week, and they were talking about the fact that airlines have kind of taught us how to behave differently. And I know you travel a lot on the airlines. Are customers, is it a full shift to booking online, do you think? Is everybody there now, or do you think there's still people prefer to dial in? Is that still a thing, or are most people going through the online reservations?
Yeah, Patronics is a great partner of ours, and I agree with what they say is there has been a sea change in how people want to book for restaurants. UK, it's always been pretty high in terms of online reservations. So there's been about a 4% shift, pre and post pandemic of moving online. I know some of your listeners are in the US and other parts of the world. For North America, there's been a much bigger shift online, but they always had a bigger proportion of walk-ins, and they still do.
So was it a longer? Yeah. So I suppose their behaviour has shifted. Their behaviour has changed, or there was more of a gap to fill.
Both, right?
Yeah.
So both of that, but 4% is no small shift.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen that type of speed of shift, pre-pandemic. But I think that trend was always there.
Yeah.
The pandemic forced people to use software and do things online a little bit more.
And I think it was an accelerant, right? If you think about in fuel terms, like the pandemic, it was an accelerant for tech. It didn't invent it, did it? It was already here. We were already using it. It just made us, literally we had to use it quicker. But online booking, I remember back probably 10, 12 years ago, I was probably using OpenTable or something similar in my own job booking. And I don't think that was, but I think it's being utilized better, would you say now?
Yeah, so we're very long-term in how we look at things. So this is our 25th year in business.
You're like the granddads of tech.
Yeah, like quarter of a century.
In a good way. It's a great legacy and good experience.
We've been here for a while, so we know how restaurateurs think, and we know how to build software and deliver a great product. But for us, yes, we've seen that longer-term shift. You don't get many tech businesses around for 25 years if there's no market shift.
No, I think it's really interesting, and you look at all the new POS providers and all these new people that come into the tech world in hospitality, and actually, very quietly, some of the I would call dinosaurs of the EPOS world actually are still maintaining the biggest clients. So where we're sitting today, I know Brewdog work with a company called Aloha, which is NFS, and I know those guys really well. And but they don't, they're not noisy. They're not everywhere on marketing. It's just, but it's legacy, and it's about knowing what restaurants do and how they operate, and actually be able to deliver to that. And you're a similar beast.
Yeah, so it's about the legacy of knowledge, and hopefully not the legacy of product. So we've gone through like a lot of product change over 3 to 5 years. Yeah, including 3-4 years ago when we shifted everything to a cloud and moved it to a much more iOS-based software. For those that have used OpenTable previously, even like I think 4 or 5 years ago, we're on a different system called the Herb, and that was like previous to that was like physical terminals that we went and came in and installed like these big like ginormous.
It sounds horrific, doesn't it? Those days of engineers putting everything in. And you mentioned it briefly there. What kind of customer behavior are you seeing? So you can obviously online's coming in, so the input's coming in from the customers, but then they're spending. I presume. Can you pull out actual spend data from these people that visit?
Yeah. So if you have your point of sales linked to our system, that's usually a couple of clicks away.
Yeah.
And we integrate with a ton of pods, and with like I think we've slated a few dozen this year to integrate. You can see all the spend, and part of the great thing about OpenTable is we deliver fantastic reporting. You can see that in system with a couple of clicks, or you can see that in the PDF as well. And we have a lot of preset reporting. So we have our legendary pre-shift report that a lot of top restaurateurs still swear by.
I think pre-shift. I was at the Hard Rock in the States for a while, and we lived and died by pre-shift, right? And to me, it was a new thing coming from the UK. We didn't really have that. So I knew everywhere in the world at 11:15 every day we were doing a pre-shift, and at 5:15 we're doing the evening one. That's a big thing in the States, right? The pre-shift side of things and the real setup of the day. So
it's a big thing in the States. I would say a lot of restaurateurs also use that, especially top restaurateurs use that in the UK as well. And then they base their whole pre-shift meeting around the OpenTable pre-shift report. I think that's kind of a great representation of like us being restaurant first. We built that report with a lot of input from top chefs. And then they said, these are the things I need, these are the things I don't need. Clean report, you print it out or you look at it on screen. And if you're a budding restaurateur, this is what like a 3-star or 2-star Michelin chef looks at.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, it used to be the most important part of the day. Always was, right? It's the first time you kind of get all the team together before you head out to shift, and you can talk about bookings, you can talk about spend, you can talk about sales targets, you can talk about menu items, the chefs, what he's got going on. I think it's absolutely crucial. And people are thinking, of course, that's obvious, but I don't see it everywhere, especially in the UK. And I remember when we first came here, people were like, what's pre-shift? I'm like, my God, pre-shift is Bible. That's what pre-shift is. It has to happen. So, and the behavior that comes out then, what evidence do you see in terms of driving spend and driving? I mean, can you explain any success rates you've seen? Like for people listening, is there anything they can grapple onto? They think, wow, that's amazing. Like something that what some of your tech has enabled them to do.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I see that's pretty interesting. Some of this was pre-pandemic, some of it's post-pandemic. So one thing you need to do during busy times, especially for restaurants that are full, mostly full, let's say on a prime dinner slot on a Friday, you want to drive per diner spend up, right? You can't magically come up with tables and chairs. So you need to go to areas where you can find places where you can find like high spending diners and be able to prove that out on numbers. For us, like I mentioned, we're part of Booking Holdings, which is a Fortune 500 travel company. We know how to reach travelers. That's why we're so good at that. And the fantastic marketers will be able to leverage off that. And we know that people that come through OpenTable Diner Network spend more. And you can see that by the numbers. You can see that in your OpenTable system. Break it down by channel. How much did the average walk-in spend? How much did those people come through restaurant.com, your site, spend? How much did people come through OpenTable spend? And we're there really to supplement your marketing. But for that Friday when you're like, oh, how do I maximize revenue? That's how you maximize revenue, even though they're full.
I think it's the key, right? It's been able to look, and that's why I love tech. And Kieran's asked me why do you talk about tech so much? Because I actually think it enables you to run your business properly, or grab opportunities you probably couldn't have grabbed before. So it's that opportunity to look down the road and say, right, Friday's not looking great compared to the last 3 Fridays. What do we do? What levers can we pull to make some more money? And having kit like that just enables you to go and work out. Okay, because I used to back in the day, I used to work out the cost of a seat. In my restaurant, before we had any tech, I used to work out that my waiter's section's worth 500 quid a turn. So we've got to make sure to pay you, for you to be here tonight, you've got to make £500 for every turn of your section. But we had scraps of paper, pack of cigarette packets, writing stuff down. But yeah, I know, not really high tech and not very healthy. But that was the way we did it. But now it's so different, right? And the opportunities are huge.
Yeah, click of a button, and you can now even do that from your iPhone. Let's say you have a quieter period, and you say, hey, we need to fill some more seats. You can actually what we call boost, so you can boost your marketing, boost your position artificially up the rankings of when people search on the OpenTable platform.
They're like a job ad, you know what I mean? So if you want to raise your job ad up a bit and get more eyes on it.
Exactly like that. And that return is fantastic. Like, I wish we got that for our own marketing, that type of return, but it's like multiples higher. So in effect, we not only give that away for free, we basically I'm subsidizing that by quite a lot. So you can pay a little extra, but like guarantee that you're going to get revenue effectively coming through that door, which is actually amazing. So we had a chat with, when I was in Chicago with, one of the best restaurateurs in the US, Kevin Bowen, and he's on our advisory board. And he said, why I love OpenTable, and he has a ton of incredible restaurants across the East Coast. And why I love OpenTable is if you told me I needed to fill my restaurant, even a big one, and it was empty, had 0 diners in it, could you do it? Like, you absolutely can. And for me, that's so powerful.
Well, it's the ultimate in power, isn't it? Because everything that's in the news, costs rising, everything, rent was in the pandemic, now it's energy, labour's been a problem, and it's an evergreen problem, never goes away. But apparently it's bigger than ever because of Brexit and all the other stuff in the UK anyway. But all these things mount up, but your restaurant stays the same. You can't increase your square footage normally. You can't put more chairs in unless you're really smart and you kind of change bench seating or whatever. So you're always stuck with the same square footage. So how do you kind of rinse the cloth and get as much as you can out of it? And that's what I think people listening in, like operators listening in, saying, I've got that one site that doesn't do this, or I can only maximize, I can get 20 grand a week out of it maximum. How do I get it to 25? Because that will enable me to pay the extra food cost. So I think that's what they're looking for, right? They're looking for that bit of kit or bit of enablement that will let them get to that next stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting why I hear a lot of restaurateurs say, hey, you're more expensive. For me, it's like, firstly, you're not paying for the same thing. So we're actually relatively cheap compared to our competitors, I would say. But you do get this dining network, and it's pay for performance. Like, I also look closely at our own marketing at OpenTable. Sadly, most marketing channels are not like, hey, proceed a diner.
Yeah.
Go through Google or PR or brand marketing or TV or whatnot. It's not pay for performance. Like, you throw it out there and hope for the best. But this is...
Yes, I've been in that place.
Yes, exactly. And if you don't have a seated diner, you don't pay. And for me, it's almost like, can you afford to, not have that person sit there? The most expensive thing for a restaurant is to have an empty seat. There's nothing more expensive than an empty seat. And that's never coming back, right? Once that time's gone, you can't feel it.
Yeah, and occupancy is something hotels have done great, right? As long as they've been around. They build something once, they fill it, and they get return. And obviously they have to iterate and redecorate or whatever it might be. But they're great at occupancy. And and there's a good friend, we know Carmen Mallow from REMS, who sponsors the podcast. And she talks a lot about occupancy and dynamic pricing and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's absolutely coming, right? I think it's really interesting how we look at occupancy, how we look at a seat, and how we kind of value that. And like I said, back in 20 years ago, I used to put a price value on it. Do you think that's something that's going to end up in our industry quite soon, or do you think it's already happening?
So I think it's already here for some segments. We're the first table management system to integrate with REMS.
Yeah.
Part of that is because we understand what's happened on the travel side. Yeah. Our parent company also owns Booking.com and Priceline in the US, which is better known there, and then Kayak and Agoda and a few other travel brands. But we see like the sophistication in the airline and hotel side, where They're kind of not thinking about, it's $1 or $2 to get a traveler. They're kind of like, give me more, because like nothing more expensive than an empty hotel room or empty airline seat or empty car for rentals. And I think Carmen's trying to work with us to help people understand that. And here's reporting, and how do you maximize revenue, and how do you drive?
It's a big education piece, though, isn't it? Because it is a shift, right? It's a bit like what we talk about in terms of tech moving into hospitality, especially into casual dining and where we are today, Brewdog, people like that. Occupancy is alien, I would imagine, to most of those guys. And I think it's seeing the return on it, seeing the benefit of it. A hotel makes total sense. A plane makes total sense because you can physically see it. But why is a restaurant any different? It's got seats in. It's got people that pay to use it. It's got people that pay to run it. So, and they have to balance at some point. So I find it really interesting. And with that data, as you mentioned before, a lot of data flows in. And we were talking off air before about phishing and fraud and these different things that can happen actually when you're owning all this data, or when you've got opportunity to access data. Are you seeing anything? I mean, have you had an experience recently about things that might have happened around phishing, or is it something that's common in the industry?
Yeah, I would say phishing is common in UK, not just in restaurants. It is increasing in the restaurant industry. So we spend a lot of time making sure like we build data security. We have a whole team that does that. That does nothing but think about like ways to avoid phishing, and obviously like much more robust systems where we can definitely avoid hacking. So that is like built into our process. So we love being the fast follower on new features. We typically don't want to be first. Sometimes we are, but the reason why is we want to make sure we engineer everything properly so it doesn't get hacked. So that's different from phishing. So phishing, as a public service announcement, OpenTable will never ask for your password and login. We spend a lot of time thinking about how we build that into our system, but also offline training. This goes to the whole, high touch service that we talked about earlier. But like even with that, get this crazy stat for like restaurants that have been called by a phisher, 75% of them fall for phishing. Some of them, like a few days after we conducted the training. So hey, this is what they're going to do. Please don't give out your login and password. And typically what the phisher does is call, hey, I'm from OpenTable. I need to fix this and that. Can I please have your login and password? Some restaurants even have two-factor authentication, so they need password and need a code from their phone. They were like, oh, I need the code from your phone. They go, yeah, no worries, here's the code. So please don't do that. Public service announcements. I just want to make sure that...
No, and do you know what? I was saying to you that weirdly, personally, you tend to not fall... I mean, I'm sure lots of people do fall into that trap, right? I have in my past, I'm sure. Someone's been fraudulent to me. But I think with business, especially from an hourly paid employee, the risk to them is less. They don't see the risk as they would. They don't see the risk as much as they would with their business details as well as their personal details. So I find it's bizarre, right, that they would give that out. But it's very weird.
Yeah, in some ways I get it because you're busy. It's heat of the moment. Staff turnover is always a problem. So sometimes maybe we did the training 2 weeks ago, and then maybe a new person has joined. Yeah. That 2 weeks have called a few times. The fishers have called a few times. I think a couple of things to get around that. Firstly, just remind your staff over and over again. Don't give out login. Don't give out passwords. The worst you can do is say, hey, I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to call back the customer service of OpenTable to double check, or whatever reservation platform or software platform you're using, and that's the best way. But also secondly, make sure that you use like different types of automation to make sure your staff is less busy, so don't aren't as distracted when they need to be focused. I think,
and I've got to be honest, the phone rarely. I don't know. I haven't run a restaurant for a few years now, but I imagine the phone rings a lot less than it used to. Because people are using online reservations. I don't know. So I imagine you would spot them quicker.
Yeah, so there's that. I think there's more outbound phone calls. And if you want to kind of like shift a little bit on what we're talking about, there's also another really interesting a shift that we see is a big shift to what we call the in-90. You can see that also in your OpenTable system. In-90 means people booking within 90 minutes of when they want to eat.
Yes, I was told by, I did a podcast with Dub, a guy called Dub Lee, who was the former systems director at Honest Burger. And he said it was prior pandemic and pre-pandemic and through it. He said that people were literally booking up to 60 minutes, 30 minutes prior to coming into the restaurant.
Yes. Some of that is former people who are walking in.
Yeah.
but it's also just some sort of shift. We aren't super sure what it is. It's a little bit of walk-in, a little bit of people just being decisive. But like that's really important because the traditional marketing channels aren't necessarily like from 2019 pre-pandemic, another universe is now like in some of them are obsolete or less effective. So you got to be where the diners are and where they want to book at the moment they want to book.
And how advanced? I mean, that behaviour that you're talking about there. Do your customers see that quite quickly? Is that something you can share in terms of insight?
Yeah. There's an actual report that talks about the N90. So I think
I've learned something new today. The N90, right?
N90. So we talk about that with our larger customers a lot, and they tend to be typically at the forefront. So I look after our enterprise business as well. So in the UK, that's companies like Caprice Holdings, who owns Ivy Collection.
Yeah.
The high volume, great operators, adopters of tech, sometimes because they have to, but also they have fantastic tech teams that think about automation a lot. Looking at like how they market more effectively in 90 is really interesting because people are booking 90 minutes.
Yeah, how do you market to those people? Because you were saying that they're probably some of them are walk-in people. Is there a percentage you could put around that? Or
it varies quite like broadly across types of restaurants, but like I think it's increased like X-folds, like hundreds of % versus 2019. I don't remember what it is exactly for UK.
But maybe that just shows the nature of the way we're behaving now, because everything's at the touch of a button on our phone.
Yes, that's exactly.
Maybe it's just easy. It's just I want to go there, I'm going to book now just to be sure.
Yes, and they might have called before, or they might have just hey, it's 2 minutes away. I'm going to just drop in, or 10 minutes away.
I was going to say I used to pop in and say I'm going shopping. Can we get a table at 2? It's 12 now, kind of thing. So,
but now they want more certainty, and they have it at their fingertips, and maybe they have less certainty on how they want to book or what they want to eat. They kind of know they want to eat Italian or they want to eat in the neighborhood, but like instead of saying, hey, I'm going to go to that spot I used to go to, it's more like, hey, let me see what is out there because I'm dining out a bit more. So people are also dining out more often.
But do you think they're multiple booking then? Do you think, because we hear that a lot, right? I mean, I think it was just after the pandemic, there's a big campaign in the UK about no-shows. I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn, there was lots of people talking about, people just not showing up for bookings, and it was caught, and obviously people were losing revenue, and staff were being put on shift when they weren't needed, all that kind of stuff. Do you think people end up doing that? Do you think there's a bit of a double play?
I don't know on other channels, but on OpenTable, you can't book within a 2-hour window of a reservation you have. We put that in specifically, and a lot of I think diners complain. We saw that in the App Store, where we got some bad reviews saying, "Hey, I don't get to double book." For us, we're kind of proud of that. Like I said, we're restaurant first. We're proud of the fact that we stopped double booking and. For us, that was a really important feature to roll out.
It's a big deal. I mean, it was a massive campaign here, as I said, just after the pandemic when people were struggling, right, financially. And I think that I think there were billboards and all sorts going up at one point about it, saying, I can't remember, no show or something. I can't remember what it was called. Abby Dunn ran it, who's a brilliant recruiter up in Manchester. And it was just a really interesting time. And actually, all the operators were saying, yes, this is a thing. This is happening to us a lot. And that's good to hear.
Yeah.
And what about reviews? Speaking about your app reviews, what about guest reviews? Because I think they're so important, aren't they? To depending where you are in the ecosystem. If you're an enterprise business, yes, they're important, but more for maintaining pace and brand, I suppose. But for the smaller chains, 10 to 20 sites, mom and pop type restaurants, reviews are everything, right? And how are you capturing them? And I suppose ensuring that they help drive the business rather than damage it, as it would be.
Yeah, I think. Reviews have become increasingly important. They were always important. So we know that, like from consumer surveys that we did, that 75% of diners will look at reviews to decide on where they want to go eat.
Yeah.
Over time, that's going to be. We think that's going to be continuing to be high because we see first-time diners increasing. Like I said, people are looking at N90, trying to figure out where they want to eat. I think people are booking more online, so they can look at online reviews more easily. OpenTable reviews, once again, we try to be as restaurant first as we can. All the reviews on OpenTable are from seated diners, so they have definitely in that restaurant sat down, and ordered something. Then
that's crucial, isn't it? Because nothing goes away on the internet, right? So once it's out there,
that's right. So not all platforms are like that, and not all of them are scrupulous. I would say that makes sure that the integrity of our reviews, both through a restaurateur and to the diner, is like very, very high.
Yeah.
So people trust that review a lot more. And the other piece of advice I give to restaurateurs is, once in a while you'll get a bad review. Like, it is what it is. Overall,
these people are human, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of restaurateurs I talk to, get a lot of anguish, like, this one particular review, but this, you can't please everyone. You can please almost everyone. I think you're doing pretty damn well already. So
yeah, and I think it's weird when I'm trying to think when I use Amazon. I use reviews, obviously, but when we book a holiday, that's the one time me and my wife would definitely read reviews, because it's a big expense, right? You're talking, I've got 3 kids. It's like £500,000 to go anywhere now with them. But you look at the reviews, because it's that really and it will drive my decision. But you have to be really careful. You don't read go to the 1 star that sits amongst all the 4.5 stars, right?
Yes.
So it's just having a broad opinion of it. I think it's really interesting. And you talked a lot there about trust, actually. And do you think trust is playing a big part in tech? Because there's been a lot of transformation, a lot of change, a lot of new players coming into the market. Obviously, you said you're working for a legacy company that's been around for a long time and does a great job. Do you think trust plays a big part in decision making? I'm very interested in the way people are purchasing tech these days, and that's why I built Tech on Toast. Do you think trust is playing a big part in that?
yeah, it's a huge part of like why OpenTable the largest table management system in the world. We fully understand that restaurateurs can switch at any time.
Yeah.
So they let their fingers do the walking, really, if
Yes.
you want to switch someone out. We've maintained a large lead because there's a lot of trust in our system, both in terms of reliability, and that meant being the best operating system you can have, and also highly secure, so not subject to hacks. But also importantly, the trust amongst the field team and our sales and services team to deliver best-in-class customer service all the time, and making sure we have the restaurant's best interests at heart.
Yeah, and you don't just supply, do you? There's quite a lot of support you guys do, charity work. I was looking through the site and I was chatting to you. Our first conversation actually was about with Atolo. Obviously, we do the grant, and we were talking about supporting disadvantaged kids and trying to get them back into the industry and give them some work. And you guys are already focusing on that topic, aren't you?
Yeah, we do tons of that globally, and we try to hire from disadvantaged backgrounds as well, particularly for more remote roles. I think a lot of them just need to be given a chance. We have some fantastic talent, particularly in the UK, where we have a big presence.
Yeah.
And we've seen some really great team members come through that probably wouldn't have been hired by more mainstream companies. The other thing I want to give a shout out to, and hopefully those out there who run a social enterprise or a school, we give big pricing discounts for those with a .org. Anyone who's registered charity or a school, or .edu. So please reach out. Very happy to support that industry, and hopefully you get a fantastic software system and a good account manager to help you guys.
No, it's great, and I love it when a relationship starts like that from a holistic chat where we were, it wasn't about OpenTable actually when we first started. And you were reaching out about the podcast. We were just talking about tech generally, and we ended up in that conversation. And that for me, that always leads you down a path, right? I think relationships is everything, and when you see someone talking about that as their first point of call, I think that's really interesting because it tells you a lot about the people that are working for that person in the business, because that will tend to, it will dilute through the brand. So it's great. And what do you think generally about tech? Because you've been around. I mean, you came from Kayak, right? You were before. How long ago were you there?
Yeah, so I had a pretty interesting path through OpenTable. So previous to this, I was at Kayak, which is also part of our parent company. So I came to Kayak. I came from Kayak around 2 years ago. I was Kayak about 3 years. Ran different businesses there, our Europe, Middle East business, as well as our APAC business at one point. And then previous to that, I was worked in corporate finance for a long time. Worked in venture capital and private equity for
One of those guys.
Yeah, one of those guys. A little over a decade. Did a few things. Was a engineer at one point, a coder early in my career. So.
You had checkered past. It's all good though. And what do you think? Because obviously we're automating everything, right? Well, I think the opportunity is there to automate as much as we can, right? To the point where the team, all these lovely team looking out the window here at BrewDog, are working at the table, doing what they should do, looking after customers, serving them, touching base, and all of the, I would call, not menial work, but the work that doesn't need to have a human doing, we can get rid of, or automate it. Do you think we're getting there, or how far away do you think we are from the Holy Grail?
Yeah, I think it's a continual process for the industry. Like I said, we've had a whole sea change in the last 2 or 3 years, for better or for worse. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone again, but in some ways it's accelerated tech adoption by restaurateurs and diners. And I think that if there's a positive to come out of that, that's been the positive.
Yeah.
Where we deliver a better employee experience for people that work in restaurants, really, right? So anything that's automated in terms of like more menial tasks, or just making sure that you're better at your job at delivering hospitality. That's what we do. We're front of house, we deliver better hospitality. Everything we build is about that. I mean, that's what gets people's juices flowing when you're sitting in front of house.
Yeah. And do you think, and you travel a lot. Is it mostly the States, or are you all over the world? Or
I also look after our Asia Pacific business. So
okay.
it's
So you're all over
literally all over the world.
And what different, I'm really interested to ask, because, obviously I know hospitality very well in the UK. I've got some experience in Europe, but how do you view it as an industry globally? Is it nuanced in every different country, or do you feel like there's a very similar line running through the middle of it in terms of service, or is it a really complex question?
No, it's a simple question. There's complexity around it, and there's upsides to that complexity. So there is localization. A diner and a restaurateur in Mexico City, in some ways, has very little in common with someone in London.
Yes.
And then same in even in like San Francisco, it's very different.
Yeah.
To how they run restaurants versus what we do here in the UK. While that's a little more difficult in terms of product development, what's been great about that is every area has their best practice.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I look after enterprise, but also look after our hotel relationships globally. We can learn from like best practices, and it's like, it's interesting how they do that. This would apply really well in this city or this country.
So you can match locations, as in different locations.
Yeah, so we have to build to the localization.
Yeah.
And then learn from that and roll out everywhere else. So we do see, for example, in enterprise groups, they do adopt some technology and sort of integrations earlier, and we see that roll out like across the industry. Some of that is us driving it, but it's pretty interesting that like we can help like cross-border learnings.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of love about my global role, that I'm able to do that and then help drive efficiency and bring like new ideas into entire industry. So that's kind of cool.
Awesome. No, I think it's really interesting just finding out about the global perspective, because as you said, the podcast has listeners from all over the world, and it's really interesting how the adoption of it, including the adoption of tech, is changing, right? And people are interested in what's happening. And I think they love hearing from people at the top of these companies talking about what your passions are and what you're doing. So, yeah, it's thoroughly enjoyable. And hopefully we're going to see you again soon, Robin. I see you quite a lot at the moment. See you when you're in the UK. I'm on the dial, speed dial.
Yes.
And what's the future for you? I mean, OpenTable, what have you got coming up? Anything exciting coming up in the next 2 to 3 years, or am I going too far ahead?
I mean, I don't know where I'm next week, but look, we've really accelerated our product development. So we had a really big feature drop, sort of started January. All sorts of really interesting stuff. The main theme around that is that we're continue to give more control back to the restaurant. So as I mentioned,
I love that.
Variable turn times by different times of one shift. We've beefed up our iPhone app for owners, restaurant owners. So now you can look at real-time spend of a table. So if someone's really blowing out their corporate credit card, the restaurant manager can go over and touch that table and say, "Hey, how you doing? Thank you for your patronage." And then also things like VIP access, when you can block off set of tables or all your tables, and then have a different link to give to your VIP, so they get priority access to book for hot times or special occasions. So all that stuff is all about giving control back to the restaurateurs. We're now sort of every 8 weeks, we're going to have new feature drops. So that's relatively new. We've accelerated sort of our ability to
iterating literally, yeah.
So it'd be
daily by the sounds of it.
Yeah, so it'd be really cool. And I love the fact that we're moving so quickly and able to deliver that. And there's some like really big innovative stuff coming up. I can't share quite yet, but For those that are OpenTable, keep in touch with our AMs. They'll reach out as well, our account managers. For those that aren't on OpenTable and haven't talked to us for maybe a year or two, it's a completely new system. So come in, have a chat.
Yes, I mean, I always ask this. How do people get in touch with you? Because obviously they want, people who are listening in and are interested are definitely about making more money in the restaurant because that's the way we do it, right? So how do they get in touch?
So either reach out to your old account manager. That's fine. The easiest way is just to come through our website. So that's restaurant.opentable.co.uk. And in the US is, restaurant.opentable.com.
Okay, perfect. Can they get hold of you, Robin? They can find you on LinkedIn, right? If they
You can find me on LinkedIn. Please ping me. I look at LinkedIn relatively often. So if you need to reach out, find me.
And it sounds like you're really busy. You must get a day off. Would you do anything like if you have any hobbies? What do you do when you're not on a plane? Or do you just sleep?
So because I travel so much, I try to spend a little time out in each of the cities.
I was going to say, do you get to see? Because again, you're busy. I'm sure you're living out of a bag. But do you get to see a bit of the city when you're there?
Yeah. So you kind of have to force yourself, and it's good to be out in the dining scene, right? I mean, this is what we do. So go out and try a few restaurants. And for me, even if you're tired, just like, hey, just go out for a meal, grab a couple of colleagues. I typically have friends in some of the major cities, so just meet up with them, and that's a nice thing if you have friends in different places, you can meet up with them. So I've had a charmed life, I must say. So that, even on the worst days, it's still a great day. It's a fantastic job.
No one's feeling sorry for you. Yeah. Look, really cool to speak to you. I've been trying to get you on for a while, and we all look forward to seeing what happens with OpenTable over the next few months. We'll be keeping up your 8-week drop, and and we'll see you soon. So thank you, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.